Welcome to the next installment of the Farzad Mesbahi podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. He is a managing partner at Good Soil Investment Management, a counterpart to Emmet Peppers. Mr. Matt Smith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Farzad. Happy to be here.
Yeah, man, happy to have you here. Yeah, we were just talking about how on one of the live streams there was banging noises going on in the background that you had going on. So if you guys hear any banging noises in the background, everything's fine. There's just some construction on Matt's side.
I tried to get as far away in the house as possible from that, so hopefully it shouldn't be an issue right now, but I'm camped out in my girl's bedroom right now, so hopefully it's not too bad.
That's awesome. So do you have kids?
Yeah, I've got five kids, and actually number 6 is on the way, due in a month. So,
man, congratulations! That's awesome.
My hairline, which is already in retreat, will be accelerating that retreat, I imagine, in the coming months.
That is awesome. That is awesome, man. 6 kids. Wow. What's the that's got to be like. What's the most challenging part about having 5 kids and I guess 6 very soon? But like, are there any sort of challenges that are part of having that many children that a lot of people don't understand? And on the other side too, what are the biggest joys on the other side as well? I'm really curious to hear, because my wife and I have been talking about having kids at some point, but I'm always picking the brains of folks that have kids. I'm really curious to hear.
Yeah, I think especially when they're young, it's like a very physically demanding, kind of job to be the parent. So, my oldest of the 5 we have right now turns 10 this month. So like they're all, it's, soon to be 10, then 8, 6, 3, and 1. And we'll have another newborn. So pretty much for the last decade, my wife and I have been, just sleep deprived, just like working dawn to dusk, and it's all the little things like potty training everyone always. There's always somebody in diapers. There's you're making everybody's meals all the time, so it's incredibly like physically demanding, and just from a time perspective, like there's not much left for you at the end of the day. But at the same time, like watching their relationships develop with each other and with us is like I can't even put into words how kind of rewarding it is to just see them develop over time and see their kind of skills and their interests develop and what they gravitate towards. So I'm sure that'll only kind of accelerate as they get closer to adulthood. But it's been an absolute joy, but an exhausting joy. For sure.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. One of my favorite things is we have a couple friends who they have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and we've been watching them grow up since they have them. And it's like that thing that you mentioned about just watching them sort of grow into their own personalities and their own people. It's something that I didn't expect to enjoy watching so much, especially as I'm not even their dad. I'm just their dad's friend, but I'm like watching them grow and watching them develop a personality is so fascinating, because you think about people, it's like people are just little people that have grown into bigger people, and like those things that they're learning, I just found it so fascinating. It's so cool.
Yeah. And they change over time, but it's so fun. Like my daughter, my oldest, just got into like piano like a year ago, and now she's started composing her own pieces. She just like of her own volition just started wanting to make her own music, and it's actually like pretty decent. So it's just crazy to see the kind of skill sets that they have and what they're interested in, because it's wildly different from what I'm interested in, and even what their siblings are interested in. So it's just fun to watch that happen.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Yeah, music is one of those things that I hear is like great to have earlier on, and like it's I don't know if there's like scientific studies behind it or whatever, but do either you or your wife play any instruments, or is it just the one kid that's picked it up?
I have zero musical ability whatsoever. I played like cello in middle school, but like my teacher actually told me when we'd have competitions, like just hold the bow a little above the string so they don't have to hear you. So it's kind of how I was. My wife's a lot more musically inclined. She was in like the drum corps in high school. She did like a marching band. She was the center snare. So she's got a lot of that capability. She played piano and everything, but I definitely don't have any skill there. I'm much more of a numbers guy than a music guy.
Gotcha. Center snare is a big deal in marching band. I was in marching band. That's a legit legit spot. Yeah. And
it was mostly guys, and she's like 5'2", 5'3" generously. So like, she's tough. She had to, kind of hold her own among, a bunch of unruly high schoolers who are a lot bigger than her.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Shout out to her. That's great. That is great. So you talked about being much more inclined to, follow numbers. That's sort of your back, the things that really attract you. What had you end up at Good Soil and partner up with Emmet? Give us a little bit of a background story.
Yeah, I'll maybe keep it high level, and if we can kind of open it up if you have a specific area you want to go into. But
Sure.
I had a background in valuation and investment banking. I was doing sell side M&A advisory services for like middle market companies looking to sell. So I did that for a couple of years, and then moved into a corporate role. Was really successful with my Tesla investment, which kind of led me to be able to have the freedom to try something else. And so I actually started like a YouTube channel, trying to focus on the energy side of the Tesla business. But around that time, I had left my job, and I just wanted to reach out to him and say, because I heard him on one of the Dave Lee interviews, just kind of talking about how when he left his job, he had some kind of difficulty trying to find purpose with what he did. So I kind of realized after I left my job, I had a lot of my kind of like routines and even personal identity to some extent wrapped up in kind of the idea of being a great employee. And so now that was gone, it was sort of like a bit of an identity crisis. It's probably overblowing, how bad it was. It wasn't really bad. It was kind of a good thing, but just with having, huge amounts of freedom and not knowing how best to use my time. And I thought Emmet had kind of navigated that. So I just wanted to reach out to him on a personal level, just to kind of hear, how he navigated that. And, through that conversation, he was telling me a lot about the kind of mission of Good Soil, which really resonated with me. And he just asked, like, do you want to try doing like a kind of informal working for the company sort of thing? So I tried it out. Seemed like a really good fit. He and I, our personalities just really kind of meshed. And I think also kind of our skill sets really meshed. He's got a lot of great background on like hedge fund. He was working in customer service for hedge funds when he was at Interactive Brokers for a while. So he knew a lot about that industry and kind of which ones failed and which ones didn't. And I had a lot of the kind of technical financial background that Emmet didn't have. So really our skill sets and our personalities just really kind of gelled, and probably the overriding purpose of Good Soil, just as a way of kind of promoting capitalism, but also, altruistic capitalism, really resonated with me as well.
That's awesome. So did you know Emmet for a little while before you guys synced up?
No. I think we both knew of each other just, within the Tesla Twitter community.
Oh, wow. Okay.
People are kind of familiar with who each other are, but no, we'd never actually interacted. And I just, reached out just to have a phone call. And on the phone call, we just kind of hit it off. And he just asked if I'd, consider trying it out, because I guess he was looking for some help at that time. He was getting a little overwhelmed with all the different aspects of the fund. And so, I was not at all looking for another job. He wasn't really necessarily looking to bring somebody else on board, but it just was one of those things that happened to work out.
That's so amazing.
I never thought I would end up working for a hedge fund. So it's just, it's kind of funny the way life unfolds sometimes.
Man, and this is all because you guys were just synced up through the Twitterverse. Was it specifically the Tesla community that you guys were connected, or was it something else that connected you on Twitter?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't even aware of them until probably October, November of 2020 when he started doing those Dave Lee interviews.
Wow.
About like the S&P 500 inclusion play. Yeah. So I was like, oh, wow, that's like a pretty interesting story. And I believe in the same thing. I'd actually made a similar kind of options play before I'd heard those interviews with Dave Lee. So that was just kind of funny that we were so, synced up just in our investment philosophy, as well as kind of like overall life philosophy. Yeah. But no, like we'd had no interaction. I think like I'd seen some of his stuff. He'd seen some of my tweets and stuff, but no, we were not hooked up at all.
That's so crazy. It's so crazy how the world works sometimes. And what really resonates with your story is sort of like, so you described how, you had an investment in Tesla, which allowed you to, become more independent financially to kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong at any point here, but it sounds like you had an investment in Tesla, which allowed you to really carve your own path, right? And then you felt a little sort of, where I draw the parallel is like, I feel like I'm in the lost stage right now, because that's sort of a little bit of my story. Is I worked at Tesla. I had a sizable investment in Tesla since really 2013, 2014 is really when it really started to get larger. And a few months ago, I left Tesla because I was there for 4 years and I really enjoyed my time there. But I'm like, okay, there's I have some financial independence now, and I feel like I need to figure out how to bring a bigger impact to the world. But I'm just like bumbling around. I created this YouTube channel, which I really, really enjoy. And my guiding principle is do something for as long as it feels fun. And this really feels fun, and it's a platform where I get to speak with people like you and other folks that I try to gain inspiration from. So what kind of advice can you give me? Because it sounds like you're at least exploring to see where your path goes, and it seems like you're having fun doing it. So what advice can you give me to figure out, or what kind of overarching principles can you share with me that helped you with the journey you're on right now?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, it sounds a lot like you're kind of at the spot where I was like a year ago, just trying out a new thing. And I loved it at first when I started my YouTube channel. Sure. But, after a couple months, I realized I didn't really want to be doing that full time. I wasn't enjoying the this might be a little bit too specific, but I was I did a lot of scripted stuff. So I wanted things like highly I was doing very detailed energy analysis, trying to really educate people on the nuances of the energy market. Because I got the impression a lot of Tesla investors just didn't have that kind of background, couldn't really think through what the opportunity was on the energy side. So I wanted to say, okay, I've got some experience in there. Maybe I can help fill that gap. And I really liked doing that at first, but then I was just, lost the passion for it pretty quickly. And it's like, okay, I feel like I'm not being called to, do like a YouTube educational kind of channel. And at the same time, I was, selling covered calls and, had more money than I ever kind of thought that I would have. And it was like, okay, well, the point of I've known enough wealthy people to know, if you get to a certain point, you're not going to get way more satisfaction out of your life by getting, 5-10x higher than that. So the goal of life can't be just to kind of continue trying to add zeros to your bank balance, because that's not going to end in a fulfilled life. So yeah, I think you're on the path. I mean, you're doing what you want to do. You're trying to find ways to have a bigger impact in society and trying to lift things up for the positive. And I mean, that's always going to be a bit of a winding road, I think, but I think focusing on that and less on the money is probably the right way to go.
Got it. I appreciate that. And the comment you made where, life shouldn't be just about adding zeros, man, that is, I really connected with that after we gained that financial independence, and we're like, okay, so okay, the money part, what's really interesting is I feel like that saying gets said so much, money isn't everything, money isn't life. There's so much more to life than money. But I feel like, because sort of my background is I grew up, we had definitely a good childhood with my parents, but it wasn't, it wasn't a thing where it was like we were wealthy, right? We had to fight for everything, we had to get everything. And so remember I had memories as a kid. It's like, man, I really wish I had money to do this. Man, I really wish I had money to do this, right? As I was growing up, teenager and sort of into my adult years. So money was a big part of my thought process, but, and then there was a point in my life where I'm like, oh my God, it's so fun having money. I can go to nice hotels. I can go to nice vacations. I can buy nice things, right? But then once thank the heavens and the universe for sort of giving me this gift of actually reaching financial independence. And I'm like, holy crap. Okay, so it really isn't about the money, because it feels hollow a lot of the times when you're trying to fill that happiness void with money. But I feel like it's hard to understand that, and this might sound a little insane, but it's hard to understand that unless you have it, unless you have the money, because it's like saying it, I feel like doesn't have the same impact. What do you think about that thought process? Am I thinking about that incorrectly? I'm curious to pick your brain on that a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a first world problem. So it's almost embarrassing to even talk about it.
I know I'm awkward, saying it, but I feel like it's a thing, Yeah.
It's true. Like honestly, I think my anxiety level went up once I kind of got to a certain level of wealth, because it was like, I don't know what to do anymore. It's like, I really, like I was saying before, I was getting a lot of fulfillment out of, being the best employee and the best dad and the best, and my life was very kind of structured around, all right, you go to work and then you come home and you be present and all that. And when all of a sudden your day is up to you, it's hard to, figure out what to focus on. And if you focus on something and it's like, okay, well, the results are probably less tangible than they used to be when you were doing an actual job and you got things accomplished, every single day that, you knew were valuable to the company. So it's a real thing. And, as an investor, like, of course, I'm not against getting more money and kind of increasing wealth. That's the goal. But I think the intellectual challenge of it is what I've realized that I like more than necessarily kind of adding a zero to the bank account. So I love investing, but it's not because, money is kind of the center of my life. So, I mean, it's like you just need balance. I mean, family is obviously incredibly important. You need, a certain amount of money just to get by and survive. So, there's nothing wrong with that. And trying to increase that for great reasons, to kind of lift up others in society is absolutely a pursuit worth choosing. And then if you can do other things along the way, like, trying to increase education in the community with what you're doing in your channel. Emmet and I try to do this with our channel as well, just kind of open sourcing our investment thesis and our thoughts on kind of current macro markets and individual investments. Yeah. That's something that we think is a net positive for society. So, it's just, I think it's trying to strike that balance and trying to, live your life in a way that you're not focusing only on, one aspect of life, because that'll always be hollow. If you only focused on family, you'd be missing something else. If you only focused on, investing, you'd be missing other areas. So
gotcha.
That's what I would say.
I really appreciate that insight. And on the topic of balance, is that something that came naturally to you to try and figure out how to strike that balance? Or was it something that you had to learn? Is it something you're still learning? Because if I talk about myself, I suck at balance so bad. And my wife always gives me so much correct grief. It's like, why aren't you more present? Because I do, like, literally my brain's like, I have a tough time sort of bringing that balance and being present and everything. And I feel like if my wife hears this, she's going to be like, thank God she's talking to somebody. But I'm curious, how did that, because obviously you've recognized that that's very important, but are you still working at it? Or was it something that naturally came to you? I'm curious to hear about that.
No, it's always been a struggle, honestly. I mean, when I was doing investment banking back, when I had my first kid, it was 80, 90, sometimes 100-hour work weeks. And, I remember, like, I had this one kind of vivid memory of, my daughter was just kind of toddling around, and it was like, I'd been working all day. I like scarfed down a dinner, and I had to go. I had more work to do. I would work till 11, 12 o'clock at night, pretty much every night. Yeah. And my daughter just like wanted some daddy time, and I was like, I can't. So like I just like raced in front of this little 1-year-old toddling towards me, shut the door behind me, and like closed it right in her face. And wow. I was like, I have to get this work done. And like as soon as I did that, it was like a knife in the heart. I was like, okay, I got to get out of here. I can't. No matter what amount of, money or like, I always viewed it as like a stepping stone into other areas of my career where I'd be able to focus on family more in the future. Mm. But that moment for me was one where it's like, okay, your priorities are not correct. And you're actually hurting your family. You're hurting your daughter. And, if you just keep living like this, by the time she's, a teenager or something like that, you won't have a relationship with her. And, so that for me was, I had that one kind of moment that was like, all right, I've got to start looking for a new job right now. But it's been a struggle since then. I mean, my last job, I kind of had like this role where my travel was continuously increasing. So I was like, all right, well, it's very hard on my family, obviously five kids to be traveling, once a month or twice a month, like I had been. So I was like, all right, that was kind of another prompt for finding another role to focus on where I could be home more. So, I mean, it's been a lot of bumbling along, and I'm not perfect at it. And, even similar to you, it sounds like the kind of emotional presence is probably even more important than the physical presence in many ways. And that's something I still struggle with for sure.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate your honesty there. Really, really shared a personal story there. And like, that's the thing too, is like, sometimes I don't know how this works, but sometimes I view, and this is just my brain, I view folks that are working 80 now, 90, 100-hour weeks. They're like literally working all the time. And I know they have families at home. And like, sometimes in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, like, I wonder what's going on there. Cause like, where's the time to do that? And then I look at myself and I'm like, I'm no freaking different, especially when I was at times working at Tesla, it was like, those 80, 90-hour weeks when I got home, I'm exhausted, So I'm like, I talk to my wife for like 4 seconds and then I pass out. and I wake up and I go to work, so it's like, but at the same time, the double-edged sword is like, I feel like the work that I did there also allowed me to now have this freedom. So it's like this weird, like, it's like, and I don't know if it's an investment of time up front to experience pain and then overcoming it. And, or is there a way to do it a little bit more balanced from the beginning? So it's like, I think about that sometimes too. Like, do you have to go through that time period,
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, obviously I made missteps along the way, but looking back on it, I don't think I would trade those experiences, as hard as they were. There absolutely is something about kind of overcoming adversity. And like, I mean, it was a really tough kind of culture that I was in as well. Like, my boss is just telling me what an idiot I am all the time. And like, I remember getting yelled at because I didn't use Arial Narrow on like a chart in one of my Excel files. And like, look at this document, Matt. Like, we are Arial Narrow. Like, this is what the big house uses. And you're over here, with Times New Roman, like an idiot. Like, it's just one of those sorts. And it sounds so ridiculous in retrospect, but when you get like reamed out like that, I mean, it's kind of like the culture of like very top, like high-end kitchens as well, where like you've got this like sort of dictator at the top who's pursuing perfection, and he demands perfection out of everyone that works underneath him. And it's an awful environment to work in. But at the same time, those are probably the two. I worked there for 2 years. Those are probably the two most valuable years in terms of my kind of professional development of my entire career.
Yeah.
I remember, so the amount of stuff that I learned there and kind of the skill sets that I use going forward, like I wouldn't be here, honestly, without that. So my wife and I talked at the time, like we knew this was not going to be like a forever career when we jumped into it. Our mindset was, let's do this for, maybe 5-10 years or something like that. Work a lot in the beginning of our career so I can be more present, later in our career. And that seemed to make sense. And I still think that that's the valuable. If you can kind of go through some extreme pain like that early on in your career, get the skill sets that you need, and then, use those to pivot and do something else in your career. Obviously every case is different, but for me, I thought that was a really kind of valuable way to go about it.
Right. No, I agree with that 100%. But it also sounds like you and your wife sort of aligning on that journey was also instrumental, because I feel like sometimes what happens is folks will just decide, if they're in a relationship, they decide to go down that path of like super hardcore, at the beginning, and then we'll get the freedom later. But the other person is not aligned, and that there's a lot of struggles there. So the fact that you two align, I think, was so important to sort of carving this path. It's almost like you're accepting what's going to come, Yeah.
We had a lot of conversations about that. And, I think kind of she was a CPA, my wife, but her real passion, she wanted to kind of stay home and raise the kids, and she does homeschooling with them now. So we knew, the kind of goal was to be a one income family. So we were reasonable about it. Like, we're both coming out of school with entry level jobs. It's like, all right, well, we have to kind of prioritize my career over hers if she really wants to stay home. So that's another kind of tough conversation as well. Like, okay, we actually ended up she had to leave her job that she got to move out to New York City with me to take this job in valuation that I got right out of school. Yeah. It was hard. Like it was a lot harder economically for us, honestly, to make that move. And, it was tough because she really liked her job that she had. So it was a huge sacrifice for her to, leave her family, leave her job, and come out to New York City to kind of struggle from the bottom. But because that was the kind of best job I could get at the time, we thought that was the right thing to do. And with the benefit of hindsight, that definitely was the right move for our family, but everybody's going to be different.
Right. Yeah, that's so true. Yeah. Sacrifices are things that are so important in relationships with the intention. Well, at least, I've been married. Oh my God. How long have I been married? 5 years? I've known my wife for like.
All right, now don't show this to your wife now.
No. This is going to be
edit that out.
It's going to go like, I knew my wife for 5 years. It's going to be like this weird cut. Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, yeah. That the sacrifices, and it's like, what's interesting too is when you view it in retrospect, is like, is it really a sacrifice, or was it just a very calculated move that you both made with the intention of? It's like you won't know that until you reach your intended stage, So it's like even the word sacrifice has a weird connotation to it, because it's not really a sacrifice if you're ending up where you are, but that's only the case if you end up where you want to be. If you don't end up where you want to be, then it's totally a sacrifice, right? And that probably didn't end up in the right.
I mean, we kind of view ourselves. We've definitely viewed ourselves as a team in this journey of life together. It's like we're sticking it out. Whatever comes, thick or thin, we're together. So let's be strategic and rational about all of our decisions along the way. And so there's been some hard decisions along the way that were painful for one or both of us. But we've always felt that if the goal is to have a large family and to be able to support them financially and to advance my career so that we could handle that, then that was kind of the guiding principle, at least for us with our relationship. But it's hard. I mean, it's when you're in the moment, you don't know that it's going to work out. Like if I could go back, to my newly graduated from college self and say, hey, listen, like this move to New York is going to work out. You'll be back in Michigan in 2 years. You'll get some good experience there, have a corporate job for a while, then you'll, be wealthy enough to quit that and, be like, okay, great. Well, this is the plan, like no problem. But when you're going through there, like the outcomes are so uncertain. And especially like when I was doing investment banking, just getting reamed out all the time. It was a lot of self-doubt of like, oh gosh, maybe I am just like terrible at finance. Like maybe I'm really not good at this. And, in retrospect, I was not good at the beginning of my job, but, getting those skill sets kind of reamed into you it was just the best, kind of proving ground to really accelerate my development. So,
that's awesome, man. I feel like there's certain parallels I think that you and I have experienced in our lives. Like, I feel like I could talk to you about this stuff like for a really long time, because I'm really curious to pick your brain on it. And shout out to our wives, by the way. Shout out to we've talked about them a little bit. Shout out to our wives.
Absolutely.
But yeah, man, that's so you're a cool dude, Matt. I wish I could talk to you about this stuff like the whole time. I do want to shift gears a little bit though to sort of now that you've learned those experiences being in the finance world, and now that you've all the lessons that we talked about that you've learned, now you're in a position where you're somebody that when I go on YouTube and I try to gain some insight into the market, I listen to you and Emmet. You guys have become folks that I just want to hear your opinion. And obviously, it's a key thing to mention that everybody should always do their own investment advice or their own investment research, and everybody should always make their own decisions. But obviously, you two are very rational voices. So what I want to hear from you is, when you're thinking about the overall market and sort of where we're heading, what are sort of the overarching themes that you see for this year into 2023 that you think are going to dominate where the stock goes? Obviously, the Fed's a big one, but are there any other ones that you've sort of identified that maybe folks aren't talking about too much? Curious to hear.
So with Tesla specifically, or kind of the market overall?
I was thinking about the market overall, but let's also your thoughts about Tesla as well. I would love to hear that as well.
Yeah, so I think this earnings season, well, really just the overall macro market for the last 2 months has obviously been just incredibly skittish, and I think what's obviously been driving this is fear of inflation and the impact that that could have on Fed action. So where a couple months ago people thought maybe there'd be just 3 Fed rate hikes or something like that, 75 basis points, and you level out at a not too bad kind of treasury yield. Well, now with kind of some of the new macro data coming out, inflation fears are a lot higher now, which has obviously led to concerns that the Fed's going to have to raise rates a lot higher. So that obviously drove a huge amount of the kind of compression in growth stocks that we saw in January, and that had been a risk for a while. It surprised me how quickly that unfolded, though. So long duration growth names got absolutely hammered. But what's been interesting about this earnings season, to me, is that like all boats have sunk, right? At least in the kind of tech growth names that I'm most interested in. Mm-hmm. But like some of them seem to have been hit with good cause, like Netflix and Facebook, for example. Like they had actually pretty bad earnings, whereas you look at some of the other names out there. Amazon had an amazing quarter, Tesla had an amazing quarter, And it seems like this, the kind of underlying fundamentals of some of these companies is diverging. So, you used to have like FANG was like this like monolith of companies that would like all rise and fall together. But I think those are going to get shaken up a bit. And I think with a lot of the smaller cap names, like a lot of these SPACs and everything that had crazy valuations, like that was very clearly a bubble. But within those, there are some companies that are still legitimate, and there's a lot that are not. So I think one of the themes that I'm trying to key in on this year, which I think is true. We'll see how it pans out, but I think there's going to be a huge dispersion in outcomes between like the legitimate winners who are really poised to actually disrupt in this next decade, and those that don't really have the technological or business or financial kind of results to sort of justify the high tech valuations that we saw across the board. So I think, I mean, just in following tech as closely as I have, I really do believe that this is going to be a huge disruptive decade. I think a lot of companies in the S&P 500 aren't going to make it, to the year 2030. I think there's a lot of other really smaller names that are going to be, giants by the time this decade is over. So I kind of see this as a setup for, the market trying to identify which ones are actually disruptive, are actually going to make, a huge amount of kind of headroom in this new economy that I believe is taking shape, and which ones are not. So that's kind of how I think about it. And I like to be kind of very concentrated with good soil. Emmet and I talk about this a lot too. We like to be kind of highly concentrated and highly exposed in those names that we think are the category of winners who are truly have like a technology or, business disruption or edge that will, help them to kind of like 5 to 10x this decade.
Gotcha. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming Lemonade is one of those names, right? I think you guys talked about that quite a bit.
It's that's a really interesting one, because there's like, we acknowledge there's a decent probability that they won't succeed. I think Emmet and I both think in like probabilistic terms. Sure. So it's a risky position for sure, and obviously it's been hammered this past year as all growth names have been. But Lemonade is one where like the addressable market is just gigantic. And I think the way that they're going about building their kind of technology platform, the use of AI, and the incredibly high customer satisfaction scores that they have are, lead me to believe that there's a high, or a decent, I should say, probability that they can, 10x, 20x from here. So yeah. I like that outcome, and especially with where their price is right now. I mean, they're trading at less than 2 times their cash balance. So it seems like there's a decent kind of backstop to valuation there. Obviously, they could kind of whittle away cash over the next couple of years, and right. Be bought for pennies on the dollar by some competitor if they don't execute. But if they do, it's like, okay, I like maybe there's a 25% chance that they 10x or 20x, and so if you do an expected value of kind of those outcomes out of like a probability distribution, say, okay, I'll take that bet all day long. Yeah,
for sure. And like Lemonade, for me, Lemonade was a name. I'm going to preface this: I am not a financial expert at all. I just like to buy stocks here and there. So I just want to, for the audience, do not listen to anything I say. And Matt as well, although he's an expert, do your own research, damn it.
Well, this is not financial advice. Like, I talk about this stuff openly, but obviously we're not financial advisors, and this is not advice.
100%. But in the case of Lemonade, so the thing that really caught my eye with Lemonade was that I think Dave Lee had started making some videos on it, and then he had the CEO of the company on his channel and did an interview. Mm-hmm. And that was the one thing that I always look for, and this is like sort of like a gut check. It's more like an art than a science, but I feel like oftentimes I'd like to think that I'm a decent judge of character when it comes to folks. And obviously I'm not talking to this person in person, but Dave is a surrogate for me, because I trust Dave's sort of way of thinking and the way he asks questions. And that interaction between him and the CEO was very, I was very it really impressed me because it really did come across as a person who's really trying to do the right thing by building a company that's going to help people, and it's also trying to disrupt the area that it's trying to get into, which is insurance. And then just recently, I started rereading The Innovator's Dilemma, which I don't know if it's a book that you've read before, but it basically talks. I read it like back in 2013, 2014, and it was in this specifically within the topic of Tesla, because it was sort of connected to that. But I feel like Lemonade, and I'm going to kind of walk you through my thesis, and you tell me if I'm thinking about this incorrectly, or we'll just kind of shoot the shit here and try to figure out if I'm going down the right path. But in the case of Lemonade, so they already have a very small market cap compared to their competitors. I think they're like a $2 or $3 billion market cap.
Yeah, and they're under 2 right now, I think, actually.
And then they're big competitors, like these big insurance companies. They're at or over 100 billion, I believe. I don't know if that's the case.
I think there's some in like the 50 billion range. Okay. But like tens of billions to hundreds of billions is like a normal market cap for these insurers. Yeah.
Right. So if I'm thinking about Lemonade's long-term growth, I'm thinking, okay, if Lemonade becomes a legitimate player of insurance, that sort of market cap valuation could be how Lemonade is valued if they are able to reach a similar scale than these competitors. And then within the context of the Innovator's Dilemma, one of the things that the book talks about is that it's not necessarily that the technology that's coming in to disrupt has to be some sort of massive improvement on the existing, is that you're completely recalibrating what your customer base is based on a brand new value proposition, right? So that's sort of the overarching theme from the book. And if anybody in the comments disagrees with me, I would love to hear your opinion. Or if you disagree with me, Matt, I would love to hear your opinion as well. But that's sort of my takeaway. So when I think about Lemonade, I think that the key thing that people want to do when they have insurance is just to not deal with people. Like when I think about somebody that is, if I have an insurance claim, I just want to get on my phone. I want to get it over with because something crappy happened. I just want to file my claim and I just want the money to come, right? I don't want to deal with these like hoops and talking to 3 people and get approved and stuff like that. So I think that's where Lemonade, that part of the AI piece, is so freaking important. It's just removing the people aspect from it and having it just be the streamlined, super easy thing. And I think that's why it's getting such high scores, is because people are just not dealing with people when something shitty happened, which is when you file a claim. Am I thinking about this incorrectly? Because that's my overarching theme as to why I think Lemonade's going to be very, very successful, is that they're removing an aspect of the business that I think folks are undervaluing, which is dealing with somebody when something crappy has happened and you got to go through hoops to get the money that you need to kind of move forward. What do you think? Yeah. Am I too simplistic?
Yeah, that's one of I would say a couple different really important kind of theses. But just to drill down on that one a little bit more, I completely agree with you. Like, I think you're not going to get a lot of like 60-year-olds signing up for Lemonade, right? Because they'd rather have like an insurance agent that they talk to.
Right.
So like, clearly this is not going to be for everyone. But if you're looking at like who's kind of the up and coming demographic, it's going to be people in their 20s and maybe early 30s who are kind of just starting out their career. And that demographic absolutely doesn't want to deal with people. They want to do it on their phone. They want it to be handled quickly, and they don't want like a 45-minute long, interaction with some agent to process a claim. And so if you look at where Lemonade is successful right now, it's exactly with that demographic. It's with, the younger people right now, their renters insurance is kind of like their biggest product right now. So it's like, they do get a little bit of a ding in markets because, their in-force premium per customer is like, I think it's $240, $250, something like that. So it's relatively small, but I look at that and say, okay, so they've got an incredibly loyal customer base with net promoter score. I think it's like 78 or something like that. I forget what it is, 79, I think it is. So like just a notch under world-class. So incredibly good high net promoter score. And it's with the demographic of people who are kind of just starting out their career and will be, leaving an apartment to purchase their first home, and will be, buying more expensive cars, and their wallet is going to be growing because it's like when you just take your first entry level job, of course you don't have a lot of money, and you're not going to be spending what is it, like $8,000 a year on insurance because right. You don't have that much money. But as that demographic ages and they're incredibly loyal to Lemonade, I think that's like the best possible outcome. Because so I think one of the things that I think through is yeah, like of course they hit the sweet spot within that demographic, which I think is important. One of the other side benefits of that kind of lack of customer interaction or customer interaction is you are able to scale a lot more efficiently. So if they do say 10x their customer base from here, their OpEx won't need to increase anywhere close to 10x because it's going to be handled with this, kind of software backbone that other companies don't have. So if you're trying to scale like AIG, like double, let's say you want to double AIG's revenue. Well, you're going to have to probably double the amount of agents that you hire to kind of handle claims and everything like that. So I think existing insurers are going to scale linearly. But if Lemonade is successful in scaling, their operating leverage should be quite remarkable. So you think the customer base increasing, like actual customer count is going to just increase naturally. Then the in-force premium per customer, if I'm thinking about this right, should also increase over time, just as that demographic kind of ages up and gets a more kind of mature product set that they're buying. And then if you kind of run those financials through a really efficient OpEx scale, it's like, man, that's going to be, they may have a higher multiple. They probably will have a higher multiple applied to them than those kind of existing insurers, because they should be more profitable if this thesis pans out. So that's where I get really excited is, on the kind of extreme bull case where they continue growing their customer base, they continue to increase the in-force premium per customer, and their, AI allows them to kind of price things appropriately, get the loss ratio down kind of closer to industry average. If they get that kind of core business right, then the operating leverage is going to be phenomenal.
Yeah, and that operating leverage is sort of the parallel that I draw to Tesla specifically, because that was the thing that really attracted me to that stock in the first place, which was that operating leverage. You just dump the money in, and then stuff will just come. You don't have to spend that much to get that incremental sale. It's just you laid everything out, and I think it really just comes down to folks believing that their AI expertise will really allow them to get there. I think it's just maybe that's the bottleneck. And I guess they're also very small, compared to their other competitors as well. And they're only doing renters. They're doing pet insurance. Are they doing anything else?
I think they have auto in one state, in Indiana, I believe. But with the Metro Mile acquisition, they'll get registrations in 50 states. But that won't really kind of flow through until next year, probably sometime in a meaningful way in the financials. And I think they're starting to do some term life as well. But for the most part, yeah, like pet and renters is I think the kind of bread and butter right now.
Got it. Okay.
So there's absolutely execution risk there. Like it's not a slam dunk that, they'll increase in-force premium per customer and continue to grow the customer base. One of the things that Dave Lee has highlighted, and some others as well, is like their marketing spend seems really high compared to the lifetime value of the customers. Which, if my thesis is true, that won't matter, because the lifetime value of the customers will increase over time as those customers kind of mature. But if I'm wrong, then that's actually a really significant issue. If you can't grow the in-force premium per customer and you can't spend your marketing dollars more efficiently, well, that's kind of it for Lemonade. Honestly, it's like, well, they need to either like drastically shrink their marketing spend or find a different way to do it or something like that, because like you can't have, for a prolonged period of time, your marketing spend per customer acquired be higher than the lifetime value of that customer. That obviously just won't pan out.
Got it. Do you view that as the largest sort of headwind for the company moving forward? How do you view the risks?
It's one, like, I think that's one. I have a high degree of confidence that they will overcome that, but when that happens is less clear to me. So, I think what you've seen is like, you start digging into these financials a little bit. It kind of makes sense to me why the stock got hammered. But in my mind, I'm like, it doesn't really matter that much in the long run. What matters a lot more than, customer acquisition cost, which is not, crazy as a dollar value itself, but is getting how successful are they at kind of increasing that in-force premium per customer? And that has been increasing over time. And so if that continues to increase, then like that concern will go away. And so to me, it's kind of like a lot of the Tesla haters would say like, oh, well, like Tesla loses money on every single car they sell. Yeah. It's like, well, okay, yeah, that's true until they don't. Right. And then it was like, okay, well, Tesla's only profitable because of credits. It's like, okay, well, I see your point, but operating leverage, like that doesn't, at this particular point in time, that's true, but that doesn't mean that will always be true. So you need to look, 2, 3, 5 years down the road and get, okay, where do the trends suggest that this company is going? And so with Tesla, to me, it seemed really clear that focusing on, net loss per car in 2019 or 2018 was a really stupid way to look at Tesla. But that's the way a lot of people looked at Tesla. Mm-hmm. And with Lemonade, I think the same sort of analogy is applying here. We're looking, it's like, customer acquisition cost is higher than lifetime value. Bad company, stock should go down like 80%. They'll never make it. I'm like, well, no, that's like an overly simplistic way. You need to take like a holistic approach and kind of do your best to project forward where the company will be in 2, 3, 5 years and say, okay, do I really believe that, in-force premium per customer will increase? Yes, here's why, but challenge that assumption. And same thing with, marketing costs. And will they actually be able to scale OpEx? Will they actually be successful in kind of decreasing their loss ratio over time, which they have been. But you got to go through each one of those individuals and not or individual assumptions. And I try to be very realistic. Like with Tesla, when I was going through this exercise, like I tried to be conservative on a lot of the assumptions, and even still, I was like, okay, I think the stock is going to like quadruple from here in 2019 was kind of my thesis, even with what I thought was kind of conservative assumptions. Yeah. But it was because I was looking at it in a way that was much different than the way kind of normal Wall Street analysts were projecting it. Yeah. Where there was like a reversion to the mean, or like Toyota was the best possible outcome in terms of like financial performance for an automotive company that could be possible. It's like, well, no, that's an artificial limit. That's reasoning by analogy rather than first principles. So I try to kind of think through things in that level of like granularity. Got it.
And so if based on so where we are today with Lemonade and sort of everything that's going on with that company, and let's zoom out 10 years in the future. What, because you talked about thinking about these things in a probabilistic, can't even say the word because I have an accent and it sometimes doesn't come out.
It's a hard one for me.
It is weird. I
struggle with English, and it's the primary language.
What percentage success chance would you give Lemonade to reach your expected positive outcome? Is it 40%, 80%? Just curious to hear. And if you don't want to share the number, that's fine too. But I'm curious.
Emmett and I actually we talked about this in a recent interview we had, and normally Emmett's more optimistic on this stuff than I am. But okay, I think I actually said I think there's like a 75 to 80% chance. Maybe not that they increase 20x, but that they're kind of successful generally with these trends that I've outlined of like increasing in-force premium, customer base continues to increase. You get the financials in some sort of like stable cash flow positive position. Over 10 years, I think it should be a lot higher than that, but maybe in 5 years, they get to that point where it's like, okay, clearly they turned the corner. They're not like a bankruptcy risk. Emmet, I forget his exact number, but I think he said somewhere like 60-65% chance that they get there. So I'm actually a little bit more optimistic on than Emmet on that point. But like it's like when you're investing in growth companies, there absolutely is a probability that they don't figure it out. Like
most fail, Tesla, right? Don't like 80% of them go back. Yeah, for sure.
Like Tesla. What if Tesla never figured out the Model 3 ramp? Like, of course, they could have raised more capital and everything like that. And, maybe they eventually have to like bring in some actual automotive expert who can tell them how to run a plant and like that sort of thing. Like that was a probable or a possible outcome, at one point in the company's history. And of course, before then they could have failed too. So I think it's important to kind of be reasonable about that and not just say like, oh, like YOLO, I'm going to, buy like deep out of the money option, like calls, and I'm going to 100x if I'm right. It's like, well, maybe, but maybe there's only 10% chance that you're right. And so what's the outcome there? Are you comfortable losing everything if you kind of, put X amount of dollars into that investment? So I do think it's really important to kind of be prudent in that regard.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's pretty, those are pretty, those are very favorable success outcomes. There's one thing you said about the Model 3 ramp. So like, I think what's interesting about like the parallels that I draw between those two is that Tesla's Model 3 ramp, I honestly think that and I'm trying to figure out how to bring this back to Lemonade, because I view them in a similar place where they're in a position, unless they turn the corner, they're probably not going to end up well. And everybody that is positive on the company is saying they will turn the corner. They will turn the corner. What's interesting about the Model 3 ramp was that and you can see this with the Sandy Monroe videos, you can see this about Elon's comments about how they use 17 different materials in the rear casting, which was one of the dumbest decisions they could have made. A lot of decisions that Tesla makes when they ramp up brand new things, they seem like they're way less than optimal, but they're optimized to just get it out the door. Just freaking make it happen so we can start getting this product out to the market. But what's interesting about the Tesla way, which I've seen personally, is that the only company that can do that is Tesla, because of the talent they have and the engineering that they have and the leadership that they have. If any other company approached the Tesla sort of ramp, like GM or Ford or anybody else approached the Model 3 ramp like Tesla did, they would go bankrupt so fast. But the reason I think why Tesla succeeded was because they had those people there that were able to innovate constantly on that. Just get it out the door, and then we'll figure out how to make it better over time, which will improve our profitability. And then with the scale that we'll have, we'll be fine. Do you think that Lemonade has a similar level of talent and similar level of leadership that will allow them to sort of turn that corner? I'm curious to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. It's so true on what you said on the Model 3 ramp, because like I remember my CEO at the time at the company that I was working for used to be an executive at GM, and she went and toured the Tesla plant. It was like in 2017, I think it was, maybe it was 2018, and she was telling us about like what a total disaster it was, and they would never figure this out. And like she was saying all this stuff of like they don't understand like basic automotive manufacturing. And I was listening to her, I was like, okay, you're more of an expert in automotive manufacturing than I am. But I also think you don't know what the hell you're talking about, because you've got this one, way of thinking about things. And then like Tesla turns around and like says, well, we're just going to put a tent up there and we'll solve the problem. Like that was not in the playbook of like GM or Ford or anyone. Right. So it's really interesting in terms of how that translates to Lemonade. I think realistically that they don't have the kind of brand cachet that Tesla has right now in terms of like attracting like the if you're a top AI engineer, you're probably going to choose Google or Tesla over Lemonade right now. Let's just like be honest about that. But that doesn't mean that they're not doing things in an incredibly innovative way and that they don't have a very talented team. I mean, I think the CEO is incredibly capable, and they've got kind of like a dual role where I think the kind of skill sets of the two really complement each other well. So, I would say they're not at the same level of like a Tesla or a SpaceX, say, in terms of kind of brand cachet and attracting top talent. But they're going against an incumbent space, which is so backward looking and is frankly kind of slow to move, that I think they've got it's possible they may be going up against like weaker competitors than Tesla was within the automotive space.
Wow.
Is it better to take on, AIG and, MetLife and all these companies with like their 200 years of actuarial data that, things have always been going this way, and we know how to run this business and it's safe and like, it's very predictable, honestly. But so I don't think they're going to be successful in kind of like making a move to not having agents and automating things in a meaningful way. And part of the reason the Net Promoter Score is so high for Lemonade is because they're very focused not only on like getting the AI right, but on like the human interaction with the AI. So they spend an insane amount of time on details like how should we word, this like third screen in the claims process. And so they try different iterations of that. And they're very kind of mindful of what is the consumer thinking at this point in time, and how can we make the process better? How can we get better information out of the way that we design this screen? So I think if, AIG or one of these other, insurers tries to launch something similar, they won't obsess over the details like that. You know, like they'll probably outsource it to a third party that like, you know, can handle the AI a little bit. Maybe they'll build an internal team, but that'll be like designed by committee sort of thing. A lot like the Chevy Volt was when GM wanted to compete with Tesla, and it was like, okay, they, you know, over-engineered it. It was, you know, a money-losing product, and still nobody really, you know, flocked to that as a you know, BEV. So that's a bit of a whining answer, but I think there's maybe a lot to unpack there with the kind of competitive landscape and what they're doing, what Lemonade is doing, kind of differentiated from the traditional incumbents.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Do you know how old? I should have looked this up before, because I really wanted to pick your brain on Lemonade. I don't know why I didn't look this up. Do you know how old the average incumbent is? Like of the insurance companies? Are they like 100-year-old companies? Do you know by any chance?
I don't know about the average age, but like, what's that? Like, there's one out of England that's like literally was created when like people were shipping things in like the 1700s, and they're like, oh, okay, well, if the whole ship
my God
goes under, gosh, what's the name of that one? I think it's Lloyd's.
Okay,
just
Lloyd's.
Yeah, so Lloyd's is
curious.
Lloyd's is 336 years old. It was founded in 1686, and they're one of the largest insurers in the world. like highly reputable. Like Swiss Re is 158 years old. I'm just looking at this right now.
AIG is 1919.
Yeah,
102 years old.
Relatively new. But like people know how to run these businesses because they've been doing it for literally 100 or more years, or 336 years if you're Lloyd's. And so I think like the willingness to take a risk on you know, something like what Lemonade is trying to do is probably going to be pretty small. And I think if they do dip their toes in that direction, like it's going to make sense for other insurers to do kind of telematics like Metro Mile is doing. And some of them are already doing that to some extent. So I think they're going to be forced to, because literally to price that product well, you need better data. So I think they're going to just the auto business at least will lose if they don't, you know, adapt to that. But I don't see the others kind of building this AI, you know, it's like an entire one piece of software essentially that like handles everything for the company, like claims processing, pricing, you know, underwriting and you know, actuarial kind of analysis, and it's constantly evolving and getting better over time. And I just don't see the incumbents doing that in kind of like a holistic way that would allow for like a step change in profitability with like the operating levers that we spoke about. I think there might be some incrementalism there, but not like the big step change.
I agree. I think the way I think about really old companies, especially in this day and age of technology, is that time is totally against you. Like the longer you've been around in this day and age, the worse you're gonna have. The growth is gonna bring more people in that over time are gonna become entrenched because of human nature, right? They're just gonna be like, I don't want to change. This is too hard. Hire somebody else. You know, I want to keep my job or whatever. Like there is a lot of like 102 years old in 2020, a company that's been around for 102 years old. All I think about is you are about to just fail. Like something bad's going to happen to you unless you literally figure out how to completely dismantle the company, turn it into a bunch of smaller companies, and then start brand new with brand new staff. Is that weird to think? Because literally, like the older the company is, the more I'm like, you're dead. Like you're going to get disrupted. It's only a matter of time with technology. What do you think about that statement? Is that too like narrow-minded?
There's probably some exceptions where that's not the case, but it seems increasingly true. I mean, the pace of technological improvement is accelerating, and that's going to, in my mind, drastically change the entire economy. And so, of course, if you're drastically reshaping the economy, then there will be companies within there that are like extreme winners and a lot that are, you know, huge losers. I was actually an intern for General Motors for 2 summers before I moved out to New York.
Whoa.
And like I knew nothing. Like I was like literally in college, like interns really don't do anything, but I was like seeing the culture and like the types of people that they had there and like the layers of management. And it was like, okay, I remember going to this one meeting with somebody who was like an executive director, and all the like people who were with me, like, oh my gosh, it's such a big deal. Like we're talking to the executive director. And I'm like, it's just a person. Like, why don't we like there was so much focus on like the company procedures instead of like the end value that we're delivering to customers or like profitability. And so Yeah, I having just seen that firsthand, like as like a college intern, I could see that there was something like definitely wrong with General Motors, and then like a year later they went bankrupt, of course.
Wow.
But I know a lot of people in that space right now, GM, Ford. A lot of my good friends work for those companies because I'm here in Michigan, and like all the same concerns that I had, when I was an intern so many years ago, like they're still there. They're like, oh gosh, like so much bureaucracy, and so I do think, certainly within the automotive space that bureaucracy is there.
Wow.
I actually have a good friend who's also kind of in the insurance space. He worked on an insurance startup, and so I've kind of picked his brain on the industry. He's actually pessimistic about Lemonade's future, so it's good to really bounce ideas off of him. But I think he's got a little bit of that legacy mindset in my mind, and I love him to death. It's nothing personal about it, but it's like, okay, I want to get the bear case from you. And then I kind of process it. And I still think you're kind of missing the mark. So I do think within the leadership of a lot of these older companies, to get to the very top, you have to have like succeeded in the old realm.
Right.
So like the kind of person who would like say we need to drastically overhaul this company is not going to be successful at climbing to the top of the ladder to be in a position to do so.
So true. So true. Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that the folks that you're friends with at those, so they're still there today to this date. They're still working at like GM and those companies, or was that?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So they're still there.
Two of my closest friends. Yeah, one works for Ford, one works for GM. The third friend actually works for an insurance company. But I've got a lot of other kind of friends and family that work for suppliers in the automotive market or for GM and Ford also, and it's pretty clear, like, to hear them talk about it, that they don't love working there, but it's a good paycheck and it's like nice benefits and everything. And
yeah, wow. So tough. that is, I mean, that's doom. I mean, that's like how does Ford or GM, like outside of literally completely changing their 100-year-old culture, or however long they've been around, and sort of these layers of bureaucracy, how do they pivot to compete in the coming decade? Like Rivian and Tesla and all these newcomers. They're so ripe to just be completely demolished, and my concern is, the impact to the economy. Like in my head, GM and Ford are already bankrupt in my head, like, and they've been bankrupt for the last like 5 years. I'm like, this is just somebody, I forget who said this, but they explain it as this is the slowest motion train wreck you'll ever see, is the failure of GM and Ford as they go through this sort of disruptive change. And my biggest concern in the coming years is, as they start to fail, the amount of jobs that are going to be sort of lost and the way the economy is going to be impacted because of their failures could be significant. Do you ever think about that? About how these legacy automakers, when they start to fail, if they start, I don't know if you believe that they're going to start to fail, but I'm curious to hear your thought process about legacy auto. What do you think the outcome is going to be for these folks? And if the negative outcome is true, do you think it's going to be as big of an impact to the economy as I think it is? Or I'm curious to hear your thoughts there.
Well, I mean, we lived through it in recent history. I mean, Chrysler and GM went bankrupt in 2008. Yeah. And what happened there wasn't a huge surprise. The government bailed them out. And, people in Michigan, like all my friends at that time, everybody that works in the space was like, well, they have to get bailed out, because if they don't, and even like Toyota supported the bailouts, which seems strange. But literally, if GM and Ford just don't pay their suppliers, the suppliers will go bankrupt, and then the entire supply chain will like collapse. And so then the other OEMs won't be able to produce cars. It's like it could produce this kind of like, runaway, economic effect, which is, I think, a legitimate concern. But I think the most probable outcome, and you see this with like how successful GM is with their lobbying right now, like pretty sure if that happened again, they'd probably just get another bailout. Yeah. The way the political landscape is working right now, like I don't see any sort of like principled stand being like taken where it's, people say, well, we just have to, kind of let go of these legacy players that aren't competitive anymore. GM had its balance sheet like radically cleaned up. They were kind of speeded in and out of bankruptcy. It was like 60 days or something ridiculous like that. Yeah. It was this like pre-planned bankruptcy where there was somebody from the Fed that I think got a board seat, or maybe it was even the temporary CEO at the time. I kind of forget the details, but yeah, there was so much kind of like interaction between the federal government and GM that it was like, well, like all the agents who kind of led into this situation were fine. They got, nice packages and buyouts. And of course there was some pain for the bondholders, but, and the equity holders got wiped out. But, I can tell you, like, from living in Michigan before 2008, when they went bankrupt and after, the economics didn't really change too much. So it's kind of some sad commentary. And I think they're trying to move in the right direction. But I was listening to the Ford earnings call this week, and Jim Farley was even saying, in order to have a successful EV business, we need a successful ICE business. So what he's saying is, like, they're not successful. Like, they can't profitably sell EVs right now. And so I hope they can manage that transition, but I don't think they can.
Yikes. That's scary. So, wow. Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's kind of where I start to, the cynic in me says, like, the whole Mary Barra and Joe Biden thing is just like Biden being really close to the UAW. Of course, there's a certain thing where, Democrats have always been pro-union, and I know Biden's history with the UAW is pretty strong and all that stuff. But it just, to me, and maybe I'm just thinking about this too simply, but it just feels like that they're already starting to have, like a part of me says, and I was falling asleep to this. I'm like, I wonder if GM and Ford executives are already talking to the U.S. government and saying, hey, we're probably going to fail in the next 3-4 years. What can we do to kind of ease the transition? Like I'm wondering if those conversations actually happen. But like the part of me, that has seen how corporate America works in a way, and sort of like the upper tranches of like the society and how they tend to work together. Like, I have a hard time believing that's not the case. Like Mary and Ford and all these folks, all the executives have to see the writing on the wall. They have to see it. I don't think they're, if they don't see it, I would really question their ability as an executive. I really would. They have to see it. Like, what do you think? Am I too conspiracy theorist over here? Like tinfoil hat?
I don't think they do see it. But maybe the one part
that's so scary.
the one part I'd agree with is like if you think that going bankrupt down the road is even in the realm of possibilities, it's going to be a good idea to have like a nice cozy relationship with the administration. So I think that could be part of the situation. But honestly, I do believe that like Mary Barra in particular, I think she thinks that GM is actually going to like lead the EV revolution, or at least will become more competitive with with Tesla, and will be successful. Like based on the time that I spent with people working at these companies, there's like this crazy brand loyalty thing going on with these companies. Like I had a Ford car for a while when I worked at GM, and it was like, oh, you can't park that car in this parking lot. Like, we only want the best cars here. So like, there's this like weird posturing, and like, even like I heard stories of like people would like park a Toyota when they would go to one of the plants, and then like the workers would like key their car. So like, get out of here like, with your foreign imports, like killing American jobs. There is, I think, this weird kind of pride that customers love our, Buick and Cadillac and still like GMC brands. I think they genuinely believe that. And you probably have to like be successful in this space. But there was this unhealthy undercurrent, at least when I was there from my time at GM, of like, they would do these shows where they'd like bring in all these cars and like, look how amazing all of our GM products are. Like, they would literally have like, 30 different like high-end GMC cars, and like the employees would be encouraged to go down and, if you want to buy one, you can get like a $5,000 discount, and go tell your friends about it. So it's cult is too strong of a word, but there's a level of pride in their products, which I think is disjointed from reality. And so I do think that they do believe that they have a legitimate shot of like, becoming successfully managing the transition to EVs. Wow.
So it sounds like they're totally blind. It really does sound like they're totally blind if that's the sort of the picture that, man.
I hesitate to paint with such a broad brush. And Jim Farley does seem to be a little bit more level-headed about this stuff in my mind than Mary Barra does. And like Herbert Diess was like incredibly like realistic about Volkswagen's prospect. But you saw what happened to him, right?
Chance. Like, I think they have the best chance. Yeah,
I do too. But if Deese actually had more authority than he really does, they really have a chance. So I don't know. It's a strange thing when kind of the more realistic you are, the more pushback internally you seem to get. But there is a real tension, I think, of if you want to do like implement a Herbert Deese like radical overhaul of the company, you're going to get rid of all your most profitable vehicles intentionally, and that's a big risk. And there's going to be shareholder pushback to that, and there's going to be a lot of kind of management jockeying for position and like people whose divisions would be on the cutting table. They're going to fight like crazy to avoid the hack and like make these kind of corporate power plays. Like that happens. And so I think there's a lot of reasons why the cards are kind of stacked against the incumbents in my mind.
Yeah. What a crazy dynamic, man. I wanted to switch gears a little bit. And so Palantir, is that something that you're familiar with? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that company. Have you researched it?
No, I hear a lot of people that I really respect talking a lot about the stock, and it does seem like they've got something pretty unique going on there. I just frankly don't know the details well enough to really have a strong opinion on it, other than people that I respect seem to really like the company. But I'd be curious your thoughts.
Yeah, I've started researching it just because of what you've mentioned, is that there's a lot of high profile folks. I know Tom Nash is somebody that I respect and I listen to, and he's super high on Palantir. There's other folks that talk about Palantir a lot. But like for me, so my background is data. I was a director of BI and pricing as well at my previous gig before Tesla. At Tesla, I was essentially an analyst, but really I was really a BI person that was also super close to the process and engineering of supply chain. So I feel like I understand data really well and sort of the power that it can have to help a business make decisions. But as I'm sort of researching the company, the thing that I'm having a tough time understanding is what is the actual thing that Palantir does that is anything different than what a BI team does, which is just
that's a really good question. Yeah.
Which is just building a suite, and then it's as automated as possible. And then the people do the work to, make decisions, right? Like, and that's where I'm struggling. Like, and the thing I keep hearing is like, well, they have AI that will help. It will help somehow. The AI will help. And my fear there is that AI has become this sort of weird buzzword that people use to describe code or to describe an algorithm. Like they're, and I'm not, I really don't mean to shit on the company. I really don't, because I still don't understand it fully. But like the way I think about it is, okay, so if Palantir has to send people out to your company to build this thing out and then leave, right? I feel like where does the AI really come in? How is that any different than a team that has analysts that build that suite from scratch? So that's one. And then from a scaling perspective, I think they're growing about 30% year over year or something like that, which seems really low for software in my opinion. But compare that to like a Microsoft, right? Microsoft is like freaking everywhere, and they have SQL and they have Power BI. And they have all these different, ways for, they have freaking Access if you really want to use that as a database, right? They have all these different tools.
Don't use Access. That's no good.
Don't use that. No, don't. You're right. Don't use Access. But they have all these different products, and they're already permeated across the entire landscape of business, right? Like everybody trusts Microsoft. They have a whole cloud business as well attached to it. Like, I don't see Palantir's value proposition. I don't understand it at all. And part of it, I think, is me. Maybe I haven't done the right research. I'm not looking at the right thing. But I'm very confused as to why folks are so high on it. And I'm afraid that the buzzword of AI is the thing that's making people excited. I don't know. Those are my thoughts. I don't know what you think about that, but that's sort of where I'm at.
Yeah, it's very clear that like AI is being like bludgeoned about by people who don't really understand it. And I worry about that a little bit with the Lemonade thesis, to be honest with you, because like Lemonade talks about AI all the time. And I'm like, okay, well, what specifically are you doing in there that gives you an edge in terms of pricing or whatever over your competitors? And that's maybe one of the biggest question marks I have on Lemonade. But so I completely agree with you that, that kind of AI term is just like AI solves everything. It's like, well, like, no, like especially within like the BI world, I think there's a lot of customization that needs to happen. Now, like some problems or like BI processes are analogous company to company, so you could, kind of re-implement those. But yeah, I do kind of struggle. Like, I don't know that I'd want to be in the business of trying to take enterprise software sales away from Microsoft. Like that's like they've proven to be pretty cutthroat over time. But I don't want to get too deep into it just because there's a high probability that I'm wrong in my kind of gut reaction here, just because I haven't dug into it as deeply as I have some of the other names. So sure. I'm certainly wide open to that possibility as well, that I'm wrong and the Tom Nashes of the world are right. And this will be the next big thing. That's absolutely possible.
Sure. And like the other piece for me too is like the AI learns using data. Right. But my understanding is that Palantir doesn't actually own the data. They don't own
the data. Yeah, that's my understanding as well. That like
so how?
I don't like. I guess you have access. They must have access to it, but they don't own it. I would think so. That's a question I've thought about too, in the limited amount of time I've spent looking at this. But how transferable? Like if you get a great process set up for one company, and you can use kind of like the AI that you've built around that one application at another company that's a competitor or something. I don't think you can actually do that. I think you would have to go and natively replicate that AI with the data of the other company. And if that's true, that seems, again, I could be wrong on that, but that's my understanding since they don't own the data. But yeah, I struggle to see how they scale really quickly if that is the case.
Yeah, it's weird. I have to do more research for sure, but and that's the one thing I'm trying really hard to do as well. Is like people, I almost force myself to say, okay, people that I really respect. If you have like a name or something that you're really really high on, I'm going to research it and I'm going to try my best to see if I can disprove your thesis, right? Like, And then the thing with Palantir is that like literally within 20 minutes, I'm like, yeah, this doesn't make any sense. I don't understand what the value, and that's why I'm like so confused by it.
Yeah, I had a similar experience with Shift4. I don't know if you followed that company, but
I'm invested in it actually.
Are you? Okay.
I love to hear about your thesis.
That's another one where like I was seeing all the testables, people that I really respect saying like Shift4's got like this, great leadership and like yada yada. And so I would read these like very detailed Twitter threads and I was like, I just don't get it. Like this, the payment space seems to me that the most likely outcome is that it's going to be a race to the bottom in terms of like transaction fees. So even if Shift4 does kind of scale globally, I mean, the quick back of the napkin exercise I did was say, all right, let's say Starlink is wildly successful and Shift4 is handling all the payments for that. And then that creates like a margin. And then I apply a multiple to that. And I did that and I was getting like a fraction of the current share price. And I was like,
oh, geez.
Okay, that seems like a lot of execution risk. And they're going to need to have like huge applications on top of just Starlink. So like Starlink alone won't cause this to be a good investment. And I heard the CEO. The CEO is certainly impressive. So credit where credit's due. He's an impressive guy, and the stuff that he's doing to kind of expand internationally, I think that's really smart. But like when Square had the acquisition of, it wasn't a firm. Gosh, what was it? I forget. It was one of those other payment platforms that installment payment platforms that they bought. So I started getting into the space and I don't know. To me, it does seem like it's going to be a bit of a race to the bottom where you're going to have to, in order to be competitive with the credit card companies, you're going to have to underprice them, which makes the total addressable market smaller. And so then how can the combined market cap of all the successful companies going forward be higher than that of the incumbents? So to me, it seemed like there's probably a limited outcome and multiples will compress relative to where they are right now. I could be wrong. A lot of people I respect, but what am I missing on the Shift4 story?
Dude, honestly, mine was like, I'm going to take a little bit of money and it's connected to Starlink. I'm going to buy some stock. It was literally that. It was like if somebody's partnered with Elon and Elon can see the future really, really well, and he chose Shift4 as the partner for what could be the sort of global communication system for Earth and Mars, I feel like that has a lot of potential. But I didn't do that deep. I took literally less than 1% of my worth, and I'm like, here, just Shift4. Let's see where it goes. So that's literally my thesis. Connected to Starlink. Starlink's going to be giant. Elon typically knows what he's doing. I'm going to trust that whole thing. And then maybe as time goes by, I'll start really digging into the financials and understanding where it could go. That was literally my play. It was super, super basic, super stupid.
Well, with like what, well, I think it's like taking flyers like that with 1% of your portfolio. There's nothing wrong with that in my mind. So a lot of times I'll do this just with like a name that I want to understand more. I'm going to have a hard time digging into like a company's financials if I'm not actually invested in them.
Exactly.
So sometimes I'll put just like a very small token amount that I'm more than willing to lose or get cut in half. And then it's like, all right, I should listen to this earnings call and dig through the 10K and everything like that. So I totally get where you're coming from. And that's a pretty decent thesis, honestly, that like Elon kind of knows where the future is going, right? And so like just like ride those tailcoats, like that's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah, exactly. The dude is rarely wrong, especially when you think about like the broader trends of society and where we're going with technology. And so if he's going to partner with somebody, anyway, that's so interesting. I know we're approaching an hour and a half already, which. This is, dude, I enjoyed talking to you so much, but do you have a few more minutes for me so I can go through a couple more things? Awesome. Man, I really wish I could keep digging deeper on some of these things, but I know you have 5 kids and you have a pregnant wife. I'm not going to take away too much time. And you're also doing good soil stuff, so I don't want to take too much of your time. I'm really appreciative of the time you've already given me, so I really appreciate that.
It's been a great conversation.
Yeah. And I kind of already talked about this a little bit. So let me hit this question. So COVID was a transformational period for a lot of people, for either the better or for the worse, right? So one of the conversations I had with Emmet was that both of our sort of paths seem to have. Mine was definitely prompted by COVID to really help me think about, and then Emmet mentioned that. What he was doing was around the same time as COVID happened, and he wanted to do a little bit more sort of thinking and praying to like understand how that sort of changed his path. But, with the whole thing that happened a couple of years ago, do you feel like COVID in any way shaped your direction on where you're going with your life? I'm curious to hear about that a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, probably in 2 big ways. The first of which was just personally. So, With my previous job, I was commuting an hour each way to work, and so I was getting up early and rushing out the door, and then I would get home at like 6:30 at night, which wasn't that bad, but I'd miss dinner, and it was basically just like I would scarf down dinner by myself, run upstairs, like get the kids in bed, and then like collapse at 9:30 after we did this mad dash to get all the kids down and everything like that. With COVID, my company went remote, and so I had 2 more hours of my day freed up. So all of a sudden I was like, okay, I've always wanted to exercise, but I've never had the time to do it. So I started exercising for I would do like 15 minutes of prayer every morning and a 45-minute exercise. So I was like, okay, I've got this like great routine kind of set up now, whereas before, like I just didn't really take the time to take care of myself in that way. So that was like a big change that like happened really suddenly. And then on the back end of my day, I was sitting down for dinner, and in a lot of cases, I'm actually just helping my wife make the meal. And so really relieving a lot of the burden of her day. And so our kind of family cohesion and my own kind of like level-headedness was really impacted just by staying home and getting those 2 hours back in my day and using them for, self-care sounds a little bit, hippie-ish, but
it's true.
A little bit of important. It's true. Taking care of myself, and then also having more really, really quality time with my family. That was like a huge change in my life. Then just from a day-to-day perspective, obviously with like the market kind of recovery that happened around then, it absolutely helped the multiples of growth stocks, Tesla obviously being the biggest one. Yeah, when I kind of made my big bet in Tesla, I was assuming a certain forward multiple, and what you saw is that the growth multiples in particular just like drastically accelerated. So I think all the money the Fed pumped into the system, and like the optimism around growth and tech stocks in general, clearly led to like outsized gains that was pretty fortuitous. So in my mind, I was like right on the thesis with my Tesla investment, but like it was accelerated by, kind of this macro thing that COVID absolutely accelerated. So, that kind of gave me the flexibility to, make such a drastic move as leaving my job. But I'm not sure if the market really took off in the macro took off in 2020, if it was just like steady macro market and Tesla significantly outperforming, I probably wouldn't have left my job. So in a strange way, I'm kind of grateful for at least that aspect of COVID.
Yeah, that's the one thing as we're sort of exiting that time period. Folks can say that one can make an argument pandemic's not over. It is whatever, but it happened a couple of years ago, and there was a drastic change to the world. And then 2 years later, I think folks have had time to reflect. Like for me personally, I remember early on, my dad got COVID in like March of 2020 or April 20. Okay. It was like early on, and he was so sick for 2 weeks. Like I honestly thought he was going to die. I thought he was going to, and then miraculously a couple of days, I think it was like day 14, the fever finally went away, and then he was able to freaking walk again and eat and all that stuff. So it was super, super scary.
Wow. And how long was his recovery after that?
I think it took him like at least a month to get back to like where he usually is. Yeah. Like, walking around was tough and everything. So he was impacted by it hard, and fortunately for us, like at least close family members, anybody I can think about, hopefully nobody passed away from the period. So I was very, very lucky to not have any sort of negative consequences, drastic consequences from COVID. I got COVID like 2-3 weeks ago. It was Omicron. It was the first time I got it. And I'm pretty sure it was Omicron because I was down for 2 days and then I was fine after that. But, it's so that was a thing that really sticks out to me from the COVID period. But then the other thing that also sticks out to me is that unless that happened, sort of, similar to your situation, I wouldn't have sat down and like really thought about, okay, what do I want to do with my life? There's all this crazy stuff happening. There's this sort of path towards financial independence that's starting to really become viable. What's my path in life? And I don't think unless COVID happened, I don't think I would have been doing this. I think I would have still been working. I would have still been doing my thing. And so in a way, and I'm curious to see, like, as we go, through the years here, how many more stories we're going to hear from people that were positively impacted by COVID in some way, because we're always so focused on the negative aspects of something, which we should be. If there's death and despair, of course, it's very important. But on the other side, too, I'm curious to see how many stories we're going to hear where people were positively impacted by what happened. And that's not to discredit all the terrible things, but I think the other side is also interesting to think about. Do you think about that at all? Is that something you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like it's, you do want to kind of keep both aspects of it in mind. Like, of course, it's like it's a terrible tragedy, and so many people have died, and I know people have been incredibly sick and died from it. And so it's sad, and there's no escaping that. But I think you can acknowledge that and also think about, what has it changed in a way that is positive? Because I don't think anything is black and white, at least of all, the pandemic. And I think it accelerated a lot of technological changes. I mean, like if you look at, how many Zoom meetings we're doing now versus before, like that's probably a much better use of time than like, I used to fly to all these meetings all the time. It's like, I really could have done most of that remotely, but it just wasn't the culture, Right. So there's so much, like, I think economic waste has been removed from the system as a result of just people saying like, let's get the work done. But, you can be in your pajamas when you need to, if you really need to. It doesn't really matter where you are, if you're, like wearing your, dry clean clothes or not, like, that's not really what matters. So I think it was a bit of a force to like get rid of some of the extemporaneous, like, like non-essential bits of the economy, which I feel so bad for my local dry cleaner. So I used to go there like every single week, and now I'll go like once a year. So they're like, it definitely hit some people hard. But if I take a step back, I think, that probably is a good thing. Like we probably shouldn't be spending like $4 to clean a shirt every single day that we wear. Like that's not a really great use of resources. Right. So yeah, I think it probably has been a force for good in that respect. And I think it has accelerated some changes that otherwise would have played out a lot more slowly. And I think that's a good thing.
I agree with you 100%. Yeah. All right, to wrap up this awesome talk that I really really enjoyed, Matt. I really really did. I feel like I got to know you a little bit better. I sort of I had a hunch of the kind of person you were, just kind of listening to your interactions with Matt or with Emmet rather. But yeah, man, it's been. I just feel like I know you a little bit better, and it's cool. It's really cool to sort of understand where you're coming from and the things that have shaped you. So again, I want to appreciate the time you took, man. It's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this kind of interview. I mean, I'm always happy to like nerd out on like financial details and things like that. But I think it's a lot more fun to be a human and kind of talk about life in general too sometimes.
Yeah, that's what I try to do with these interviews. Is like I just want to get to know the person, and then we'll talk about the things that we nerd out about. But I also want to really get to know the person as well. So I appreciate you being so open to opening up. I do. Okay, so I'm going to play a little game with you. Okay, so it's called Predict the Future game. Okay. And these are just questions that I came up with. And again, nobody hold Matt accountable to this, please. It's just a game. All right. There's nothing. There's no freaking anything special here. Just I'm really curious to see what you think about. Okay. In 2022, how many times do you think the Fed will raise rates?
4.
And then what's the total percentage are they going to raise it by?
I think 1%. So I think like 4 25 basis point hikes seems about right to me. I could see it being 3. I don't think it's going to be much more than that. And maybe I'm straying too far from the original question, but there are some people kind of seeing like doomsday scenarios where like over the course of say the next 2 years, they raise rates by like 4% or something like that to really combat and runaway inflation. I think that's highly unlikely. So, yeah, pull this video down in 2 years if that's the case. But I think there's going to be like rate hikes are obviously coming, but I think they're going to cap out around 1.5% or so in the next 2 years.
Got it. Because I remember,
I don't think the deficit can handle that much variable interest rate. I think a lot of people don't realize how, if you double the rates or triple the rates, how much of an impact that has on the deficit, which is already out of control. So I think that's going to be the limiting factor.
That makes a lot of sense. I remember watching, so I don't know if you follow Meet Kevin, but he's somebody that I just watch sometimes. Yeah, just for more entertainment value. I respect his opinion and everything, but I just kind of listen to what he talks about. But the one thing
hair. I wish I could pull it off.
Yes, yeah, the pink, green, whatever freaking color he had going on. But he recently he was talking about, he was covering when Jay Powell, as he calls him, Jerome Powell, comes out and talks about the thing. He's like, oh, we need some sort of clues that will tell us that it's not going to be a half percent, 50 basis point increase, And then he was making a big deal that we weren't getting that sort of guidance. It's like, oh, it could be a 50 basis point increase, but you seem pretty convinced that that's not. It's going to be slow and low is what it sounds like from your perspective.
I don't know about slowness. Maybe they do 25 basis points in March and 25 basis points in May or something like that.
I gotcha.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. But I think where I maybe have more conviction, and of course I could be wrong, but maybe they roll those out quickly. But I think the overall, the cumulative increase, I don't think is going to be more than say 1.5%.
Got it. Okay. Makes perfect sense. What do you predict will be Tesla's share price by 2025?
Ooh, 2025. That's interesting. Yeah, this is where I'm prone to pull out my model and be looking at the forward ratio based on my 2026 earnings.
If you want to, you can. It's up to you.
I won't do that. It would be not great watching. But yeah, to me, you have to make an assumption about do they actually solve autonomy, and do they actually are robo-taxis a thing? Because if they don't, then there's one answer, but and it's a very binary outcome. Whether or not the Tesla network launches and there's a fleet of millions of robo-taxis out there generating platform fees, and FSD is going for $30,000 or more, the wildly different answers that that binary outcome will suggest. I think it's more likely than not that they will have robotaxis on the road by, so let's say, the end of 2025.
Yep.
And that the market will kind of price that in accordingly. And if that's the case, just spitballing, not going off of, my model, which does account for this in more detail.
Sure.
I don't know. I think like, $4,000 to $5,000 seems like a reasonable price by then, but maybe $4,000. 5,000 is probably a little bit on the high side, but that seems like a reasonable outcome, and it could be a lot higher. Like I've run scenarios where, like, if you take the full self-driving take rate to 100%, which sounds ridiculous, but if they actually solve autonomy and there's this like crazy demand, then they would prioritize like robotaxi fleet operators who would presumably have as much demand as Tesla could produce by 2025. So I think there's a reasonable scenario where like FSD is priced at like $30,000. The take rate's 100%. They're selling, 7 million units by that time, let's say. And there's this fleet of robotaxis out there. And so like maybe in the most optimistic bull case, it's like $10,000 or something like that. I think that's a potential outcome. I don't think it's likely, but I think that's potential.
Got it. Yeah. What's interesting, I literally just pulled up my model. I have this thing out to like 2034. It's like or 2035. I'm just like having fun. It's like nothing for fun, but I have it at 4,500 by the end of 2025 . So right in the middle of your
4,500. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Great minds.
Look at that. We figured it out, guys. Buy. No, don't buy. Do your own research. That's funny. Lemonade's market cap by the end of 2022. What do you think it's going to be at?
Ooh, that's I almost wish these questions had been reversed, because like the end of 2022 is
take it out to 2025. Take it out. Yeah. Take it out to 2025.
2025, like by that point, it seems like it will become clear whether or not like they've actually scaled enforced premium and all those things that we were talking about earlier. Under the scenario where that does happen, I think they would probably 10x from here. I mean, and still that's only like 19 billion. So they wouldn't, even by 2025, I don't think be at the same valuation as a lot of the incumbents. To do that, I think they really need to scale customer base like a lot. And I just don't see them, getting, I forget the exact number of customers they have right now. I wish I had that up, but, to really kind of grow into like let's say the $100 billion valuation, I think that's going to take closer to a decade if they're successful and kind of, growing, maybe 30 to 50% per year, something like that. And having this kind of outstanding operating leverage. So, but I think by 2025, I think there's a reasonable chance that they 10x. So let's say, $300 per share by the end of this year. I don't know. I think they might start to turn the needle a little bit. I mean, it's tough to say though. A lot of it depends on what financial results they post. And I think there is a high degree of uncertainty around that, honestly.
Got it. Okay. Thank you for that answer. When will Tesla reach level 4 autonomy? Do you buy Elon's claim of this year?
I don't. Okay. Like I've tried to be an FSD like I'm probably more optimistic than almost anybody on like the potential for robo taxis and them solving this problem. But I also have probably been more vocal than most people on like the current FSD beta build like fails very frequently. Just this week, it doesn't handle snow at all, for example. So that's not an insurmountable issue. Like you just need to slow down your acceleration and your deceleration when you're braking, but like they haven't programmed that into it yet. So like that's another like massive thing that they need to solve before, this would be possible. And then like, I guess to solve level 4, you probably don't need to solve reverse summon, but that's another very difficult challenge, I think, that we've yet to see any progress on. Yeah. So I think it's going to get the analogy I like to think of is maybe like 2 years ago when they first introduced like the like auto merge onto highways. Like that was scary. I watched a lot of those videos when that feature was first introduced, and it would like make these terrible mistakes at the worst possible moment, and the driver would have to like slam on the brakes, get into the shoulder, and then like get back behind a truck that it almost ran into. Like it was not good. And that's kind of where I think we are in like the city street driving right now. It like frequently makes like bad mistakes. But if you look at how quickly they went from that to like highway driving is a breeze now. And it's like the most relaxing thing ever. And it like hardly ever makes any mistakes whatsoever. Yeah. So I think the pace of improvement is going to be a lot higher than people think. that said, I still think it's probably going to be 2023 before we've got like actual confidence that it's like level 4 in a way that you could actually like take your eyes off the road for a bit of time.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree with you. I think so. I put up a video on my channel yesterday. I went around Austin, the city of Austin, and I recorded a full self-driving video with 10.10. And there were certain situations that it just handled it so poorly. But I think what's interesting is the thing I'm trying to calibrate is knowing that humans are bad at understanding sort of exponential growth.
Yeah.
Like by the end of this year, I wouldn't be surprised if there is like level 4 autonomy in specific use cases or like in like good weather climates. So maybe they'll just like geofence it to like, or they just say, hey, if I detect snow, no level 4, like you're driving. Right. But if it's sunny and it's fine, the weather's good, level 4, you're good. I could see them doing that, But yeah, I think your approach is the wisest of them all. Is to sort of, like definitely. I think certain situations are going to be way more difficult to solve. Like the parking lot situation, I agree with you 100%. Like that's a freaking hard one. Like trying to how to navigate a parking lot with cars coming out, and like you have to negotiate. You're always negotiating, and like 50% of the time, someone's pissed off. You know what I'm saying? Like what the hell? So I'm curious to see how it's going to figure that out. Yeah,
and you don't have somebody that can like bail you out in the driver's seat if it gets
right.
Like, if the computer gets overloaded. But like I think we're still. I even hesitate to judge the current progress too much because we're not on single stack yet. And that's such a foundational transformation that like, I almost don't care what it's doing right now. What I really care about a lot, and I just can't wait to see, is what does single stack look like when it comes out? And more importantly, what is the rate of improvement once single stack comes out? Because I think once like this V11, which is supposed to come out this month, according to Elon's tweet, like that's going to be essentially the backbone that all these future iterations are worked off of. And they've been working on this for so long, and it's such a massive rewrite of everything that it's like, okay, 10.10 sounds like it's a step backwards for most people. It's obsolete already, honestly, because like single stack's going to come out and they're going to like how quickly it improves from there once they've got this architecture that is going to be the framework for everything FSD going forward, even like up to Dojo. When Dojo's iterating on it, Dojo's just going to be iterating on this framework that they've built with single stack. So that's so important in my mind is how quickly do they improve once V11 comes.
Got it. Yeah, I'm so freaking excited for that myself because he's been hyping that up for so long. That
it's been so delayed,
single stack. Yeah. If it comes and it's not super like game changing, I feel like it might be a sort of fall flat. Sorry, you were gonna say something.
No, well, I was just gonna say like you're switching between like the highway like neural net system and then like the parking lot neural net system is obviously like a total disaster right now. But like this one single stack will be able to handle the whole thing, and that's just incredibly exciting to see how it does. But yeah, I agree with you. Like, ask me that question again, like a month after V11's come out, and I think I'd have a lot more confidence in my answer. But the answer may change drastically depending on what that looks like.
Got it. As soon as it's out, like the first fit, what you have a Tesla and full self driving, right? You've been driving around. Okay.
Beta.
Yeah. I think you and I should both, as soon as we get the update, we'll both go out, test it out, come back, and then we'll share ideas. Be like, oh my God, did it fall flat on his face or whatever? Yeah.
That'd be great. Because it seems like mine falls flat in this area around me, like way more than is common. So I try to be realistic about that. But yeah, I'd love to do that.
Awesome. All right. Fingers crossed. Hopefully Elon delivers here. And then a couple more here. When do you think the Tesla bot will launch?
I'm probably, Emmet is like super optimistic on this, and I'm a little bit more tempered, I think, in my expectations than he is. I think like first commercial delivery to an actual customer, I would probably guess 2025. Maybe I think they probably, implement some early prototypes at their factories and, work on that. But I think like one of the things I wonder about is like, how are they going to handle like the feedback, iteration loop? Like with driving, it's pretty clear, like the driver takes over and the car says, okay, like I did something wrong, and you can get feedback. But like, how do you, like, if you want the bot to like lift something up this high rather than, this high, how do you provide that feedback? And like, how do you, like, you to like grab its hand and stop it? Like probably not. But to me, there's the interface between the owner of the bot and the bot itself in terms of providing a meaningful feedback loop that can help train it in these other real world applications other than driving. I don't know what that's going to look like. And I imagine that'll take a bit of time to solve, even once the robot itself has, say is capable of walking and doing like very basic things. So that to me is maybe a challenge that I haven't heard a lot of people talking about.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think even just thinking about like how to teach the bot to even do the motion, period. Like the only thing I can come up with is like, okay, like maybe you have like some sort of like glasses that have cameras and you have sensors, maybe like a couple of wristbands or something that you wear that are somehow connected. And then they, the motions you do as a person get fed into the bot. But then to your point, like once it's not doing it correctly, like how are they going to do it? And will they? And I'm curious, like, will that spawn a brand new industry that we're not thinking about when it comes to like using almost like wearables, right? To like teach the bot? Could that be its own industry in some way that's, that could supplant, I don't know, like health tracking software or things that you wear on your body? I don't know. Like it's super early in my thought process, but I agree with you. It looks, I don't know how they're going to do it.
With the variety of tasks that it's going to need to learn, like I don't know what that feedback loops look like. Like imagine like you've got one in your house and you say, hey, I like my coffee a little bit stronger. Can you brew that coffee stronger next time? I don't know what that feedback loop looks like. Like presumably there should be like some audio part of it, but then it seems like the AI backbone on that, like obviously Tesla's focused on vision only for the driving. And it seems like the feedback loop from vision is going to be pretty straightforward. But there's this whole other, if you're trying to replace workers, like audio, input is going to be another huge layer that Tesla hasn't really tackled yet that I think could take some time. Yeah,
I agree with you 100%. Second to last question. When do you think Elon will stop working at Tesla?
That's another good question. I think I would say later than 2025, but probably earlier than 2030. I think Elon, I mean, it's very clear that he wants to kind of focus on the Mars colony, and that's going to be like in the latter portion of his life. I think he wants to really do everything he can to get that off the ground. Tesla, I think, is obviously he believes in the mission of Tesla, accelerating the sustainable future, the transition to a sustainable future. I can't even remember Tesla's mission statement right now.
The accelerating the
world's transition to sustagnable
transport and consumption of something.
Yeah,
I should know this.
Yeah. But like I think by the time they solve autonomy, like Tesla will just be so like drastically cash flow positive, and there's not going to be these kind of like. Of course, there's a lot of products that they'll need to work on, like home HVAC and like probably a VTOL jet. I could see like in 2027, maybe they seriously like take that project up. But I think by that time, like the goal will be Tesla's producing so much cash flow that Elon can use that his portion of that cash flow either through dividends or maybe selling some of the stock to fund the Mars colony. And so I think his attention is going to shift to that. And I could see him, leaving SpaceX. Maybe he stays on as chairman or something or leaves Tesla. Maybe he stays on as chairman, but I don't think he wants to be the CEO even now, to be honest with you. But there's not a clear person that can take the spot. So I think he gets it to a point where it's like, people can't screw this up anymore. You get some competent kind of manager who can, make sure nothing breaks and lead a couple of these new initiatives that we'll be working on. But I think Elon kind of rides off to Mars latter part of this decade.
Yeah. I tend to agree with you. I think the timeline might be longer. Maybe I see him maybe stepping down after 2030, if I were to guess. Just sort of how I think about I'm thinking about it, but I agree with you 100%. It's clear that SpaceX is his true passion. Colonizing Mars and going to Mars is his truest passion, it seems. And I think devoting all his time to that will make sense for him.
So do you think he gets another compensation package in the next year or two?
Man, right? I think it's 100% dependent on. Well, what's interesting is that it seemed like the compensation package he got was it happened soon after or right around the time that they completed the master plan, right? I think it was like the first master plan. And so the second master plan has cars in every segment, robotaxi, solar and batteries. So I think once those three things are either close to or at completion, that's when he'll get his next one. So I don't know if maybe it could be. I mean, they could very well introduce a car in every segment in the next couple of years, or at least announce a car in every segment. You know, like they're missing a van. You know, the $25,000 car is going to get announced here any second, I think. And I think it will get announced. I still think it will get announced this year. Like they will show it this year. I'm still confident
even
that
after Elon's comments of like future products, he was soft pedaling those for sure. That's
I think there is a variable of my God, why am I blanking on this word? Like under promising, right? Where he is sandbagging. Like I think there's a lot more sandbagging to him than it seems. And I think he's used this supply chain sort of craziness and the ridiculous demand that Tesla has right now. He's so confident in the financials that I think he's leaning really heavily into the sandbag, because there was a trend that started happening right around the time that Tesla got profitable, where he started becoming much more measured outside of FSD. Like take FSD, FSD he's been super bullish on for a while, but everything else about the business, like Model Y came early. The amount of deliveries that did in Q4 completely blew everybody out of the water. He set an expectation on Twitter that said, hey, we're not going to go that crazy, right? In Q4, and then boom. So I think he's using this time smartly to sort of bottle, sandbag. And then as the year goes along, and I think once they have a more solid footing, I think the $25,000 car is going to get revealed. They might even potentially announce Cybertruck production at some point later this year, if I were to guess. But there's something fishy. I know how the company works. I know how fast they freaking are. It's just Elon saying, no, we're not going to work on this year. Just doesn't sound like Tesla to me, but I could be completely wrong. Please, nobody listen to this, please. Nobody listen to this. This is just my head.
I agree with you on the sandbagging. Like they sandbagged Model Y, they sandbagged like Shanghai production, everything like that. But I don't know, like listening to the rationale of like the constraints with the existing products, like I could see them maybe announcing something later this year. But I wouldn't expect production even in 2023 of like the $25,000 version or something like that. Like to me, they need to have an oversupply of the existing products, I think, before they try to go down market. Okay. So to me, that just seems logical, but I don't know. They're building out capacity so strong, and I could be surprised. But I think with inflation, with all like the price increases we've seen, even still, like the gross margins haven't been improving as much as you thought. So maybe the $25,000 car is like a $30,000 or $35,000 in the future. I think that may have changed. But I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
I don't even know if the $25,000 cars. I don't know if Elon's thinking about it as hey, let's make sure we get all the demand we can before we go down market. I really think the guiding principle is flood the market with EVs. Yeah, I don't care when we do it, flood it, right? So if he's not working as quickly as possible to make that happen, it seems like he's going against his own sort of guiding principle. And I get that there's a ton of of factors that are impacting that decision today to say, hey, we're not going to focus on new products. But I don't know. I tend to be over optimistic sometimes. So this could be me totally being over optimistic. So I wouldn't be surprised. I would not be surprised. Okay. And then, so lastly, I just want to ask you this one last question. It's not really pertinent to the future, but what do you think is humanity's purpose?
Oh, that's you went philosophical on me.
I went super deep for the last one. I already melted your brain the last hour and a half. Now you got
So I'll preface this by saying I'm practicing Catholic, and so I've got that kind of worldview, and I recognize people are going to disagree with me in this, but I do believe that we were kind of created in the image and likeness of God, and so I think God created us for relationship with him. And so I actually see a lot of kind of parallels with that in raising my own kids, where it's like, I have this role of father with the kids, and, I had a hand in creating them, obviously along with my wife, but we have this relationship with each other that is, more than, just our, value apart from each other. And so I think, I do think, there's maybe that kind of traditional Catholic worldview of, being created for, to celebrate with God in heaven is really what I do believe. And I don't talk about that a lot just because I know people have different views and will disagree, but I obviously respect everybody's view, and that's just, what I actually do believe.
That's great, man. No, I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think I'm not a religious person per se, but I totally respect that. I love the fact that's your path and what you've chosen to be and what you see is the path for yourself. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think growing acceptance around all of people's what they think is humanity's purpose or their purpose is extremely important, regardless of the spectrum. And I really appreciate you being open about that. And I think that's a beautiful thing, especially if it's really bringing joy and it's really making you somebody that's, if you're getting closer to God by doing that, like, why wouldn't you do that? That's a beautiful thing. That's awesome. And I really want to appreciate you being so open about it. Yeah.
It's funny. I tend to be a little bit too heady, I think, sometimes, and I actually kind of came to this belief like through logic more than anything. Okay. So I think there's maybe this perception out there that like, religion and, logic or, like rationality are at odds. But at least in my case, it's like, it seems more likely than not to me that like this is true. And so and if that is true, then like there are implications about a host of other things. And so I've kind of loved the logical rabbit hole of like some of the great thinkers and, Christian history and everything. So I've dug a lot into like apologetics and like atheist versus, Christian or Catholic beliefs. And those are some just really interesting conversations. So I'd encourage anyone just to like find some really great, resources on that. Cause I think there's a lot of like poor debates out there on things that aren't really thought through well. But when you can find the people who have thought about this in a great deal of detail, those are incredibly intellectually stimulating conversations. And I've really enjoyed those.
I agree. Yeah. I watched a couple of those that were very thought-provoking. It really helped me understand where folks that believe in God or are religious or believe in a higher power, how they approach it. And it was very eye-opening for me because it helped me really understand where they're coming from, but also that, hey, there is a possibility that this could absolutely be true. And I think for me, it's like just understanding where people approach, where people come from and how they approach the question of religion and the God is so fascinating. And ultimately, I think it's part of the beauty of the human condition is to like try to figure out, like try to understand how other people think about this, try to figure out for yourself, but also just talk about it, like sit down and talk about it and have a beautiful experience. I think that's one of the coolest things about being a human.
Yeah, I agree. It was actually kind of funny listening to Elon on that Babylon Bee interview because they kind of ventured into that territory, and it was like they were actually trying to prompt some questions that I think were pretty deep. That Elon normally has like thought about things in incredible detail, and in this case, like some of the objections he raised, I was like, okay, those are like 101 level, like like very basic criticisms. Like, I wonder like if somebody actually pushed him on this, like with some of like the rational responses to this, like. How he would respond. So that would be curious to see sometime, but
maybe we'll get you to interview him one day and then maybe you can press him on that.
I think, I don't know. Probably not going to happen. He still hasn't done the interview with Dave and Rob yet.
I know.
I'm looking out for that.
My God, he's really like going slow on that. Matt, thank you so much, man. It was almost 2 hours, man, and this was a breeze. I find it so easy talking with you. You're welcome anytime back, man. I would love to keep talking with you. I think the cool thing about the really the full self-driving thing that's coming out soon with the single stack, I would really love to compare notes once that happens because I'm really curious how that goes. But with anything else, if you ever want to come back on, I would love to have you on to sort of keep talking about some of these things. But I really, 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 really enjoyed this conversation, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I did as well. We'll have to do it again. So thanks, Farzad. It was a great time.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody. Oh, did you want to give folks sort of where they can find you, either on social media or on the YouTube channel?
Yeah, so you can find us on YouTube on Good Soil Investment. We have weekly live stream Emmet and I do there Tuesdays at 12:30 Eastern. So you can check us out there. My Twitter handle is like a mess. If I ever knew that I would be a public figure, I would have a better Twitter handle. So you can just look me up, Matt Smith. You might be able to find me that way. But yeah, otherwise, just thanks for having me on.
Of course. It's so funny you say that, because I asked Emmet, is like, hey, how can I reach out to Matt? He's like, hey, here's his Twitter handle. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Here we go. But awesome, man. Thank you again. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thanks.